The vast expanse of deep space was dotted with stars, a vast backdrop for a sleek, futuristic academy that hovered between worlds. This academy, designed with cutting-edge technology, was home to some of the brightest alien minds from across the galaxy. Their species, hailing from distant star systems, were all gathered in a grand hall, eagerly awaiting the start of their first lesson on military strategy. Their uniforms shimmered under the Academy's artificial lights, and their eyes were filled with curiosity. Today was special. The lesson they were about to receive was unlike anything they had encountered before. The students chatted excitedly, unaware of the gravity of what they were about to learn. The galaxy's most respected alien war general, General Salir, stood at the front of the room. His reputation for tactical brilliance had spread far and wide. He was known for his calm demeanor and sharp intellect, capable of analyzing battle strategies like no other. As he stepped up to the lectern, the room fell silent. "This will be a lesson you will never forget," General Salir began, his deep voice echoing across the large hall. "Today, we will study Earth's war tactics. They are unlike any you've ever encountered before." A ripple of laughter passed through the room. The aliens, who had been trained in advanced warfare for centuries, scoffed at the thought. Earth, they thought, was a primitive planet. Its technology was crude compared to the advanced weapons and AI systems that the alien species possessed. The idea that Earth, a seemingly insignificant world, could have any meaningful war tactics was laughable. "You must be joking," one of the students whispered to his neighbor, his alien eyes glinting with amusement. "Earth has no advanced technology. Their weapons are barely more sophisticated than ours from centuries ago." General Salir's expression remained calm as he raised a hand. "You'll see for yourselves," he said, his voice steady, but laced with an air of mystery. With a soft command, the lights dimmed and a large holographic screen flickered to life in front of the class. The students watched, intrigued but skeptical. The footage began to play, showing what appeared to be a standard combat operation between a human soldier and a squad of alien soldiers. The human was vastly outnumbered, and his weapons seemed primitive, a rifle that looked outdated by galactic standards. Yet the human soldier was moving with a precision and ruthlessness that none of the students had expected. The screen showed the human soldier using guerrilla tactics, hiding behind rocks, setting traps, and ambushing the aliens with extraordinary cunning. The alien soldiers, despite their advanced armor and weaponry, were being picked off one by one. The footage was raw, real, and brutal. "Impossible," one of the students muttered under his breath. "This can't be real." But it was. The human soldier had single-handedly taken down an entire squad of highly trained alien soldiers. The remaining aliens fled in terror, completely outclassed by the humans' tactics. The footage paused, and the lights flickered back on. The students sat in stunned silence. Their mouths were agape as they tried to process what they had just witnessed. How could a single human soldier, armed with nothing but primitive tools, defeat an entire squad of highly advanced alien warriors? General Salir stepped forward, his gaze sweeping across the room, taking in the disbelief on the faces of his students. He knew what they were thinking. How could a race of beings as technologically backward as humans possibly pose a threat? He paused for a moment, letting the tension build. "Are you ready to learn why humans have defeated armies much larger than their own?" he asked, his voice low and serious. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the Academy's technology. The students exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what to think. General Salir continued, his tone becoming even more solemn. "The lesson today is not just about Earth's weapons," he said, his voice growing heavier. "It is about their mindset, about their ability to fight against all odds, even when they are vastly outmatched. Humans are not just fighters. They are survivors, and that is what makes them dangerous." The students sat up straighter, their interest piqued. This was no ordinary lesson. General Salir was not talking about just technology or tactics. He was talking about something deeper, something primal. Humans fight not because they have the most advanced technology or the most powerful weapons. They fight because they have something far more powerful, Ziller continued, his eyes glinting with intensity. They fight with the knowledge that if they don't, they will perish, and they will do whatever it takes to survive. As he spoke, the holographic screen lit up again, displaying more footage. This time, a series of clips showing Earth's defense strategies in full force. There were images of human soldiers working in unison with advanced technology, drones, AI systems, and robots that were capable of executing highly complex battle strategies. But it wasn't just the tech that was impressive. It was the way humanity adapted, using every tool at their disposal to gain an advantage, even in the most desperate situations. General Ziller turned to face the class again. His expression was grave, and his next words carried the weight of a harsh truth. You may have advanced weaponry, faster ships, and more powerful AIs, but Earth's true strength lies in their unpredictability. They will not follow the rules of war. And that, students, is why they are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The students were speechless. Their minds raced, trying to comprehend the enormity of what they had just learned. How had Earth, a relatively young and unassuming planet, developed such a unique and formidable approach to war? But the lesson wasn't over. General Ziller's gaze sharpened, and he spoke with renewed intensity. You will now learn how Earth's greatest weapon is not in their technology alone. It is in their sheer will to survive. And that, my students, is why the galaxy underestimates them. As the lights flickered once more, the students braced themselves for the next part of the lesson. They were about to learn just how far humanity would go to defend itself, and why no one in the galaxy should ever underestimate them again. The atmosphere in the room was charged with tension. The students, still reeling from the shocking footage of Earth's guerrilla tactics, were now bracing themselves for what came next. General Ziller stepped forward, his calm demeanor belying the gravity of the lesson. He pressed a button on his wrist console, and the holographic display shifted to a new set of images. These images weren't of battles fought in the far reaches of space, but of Earth itself, its history, its past wars, and the evolution of its military strategy. The lights dimmed as the screen came to life with pictures of ancient human battles. These were images from Earth's distant past, long before the advent of advanced technology. The students watched as the images revealed human soldiers engaged in intense, bloody conflicts. There were images of world wars, guerrilla warfare, and desperate, last-ditch efforts to defend their planet against invaders. Despite their lack of advanced weaponry, humans had one key advantage: unpredictability. They didn't have the tech we see today, General Ziller explained, his voice serious. What they did have was resourcefulness, surprise tactics, stealth, and sheer willpower. Humans have been fighting to survive for millennia. Even when they lacked the power of their enemies, they adapted. They became experts at using what was available to them to turn the tide of battle. The students, initially dismissive, now seemed more thoughtful as the images flickered across the screen. These weren't just stories of human bravery. They were stories of cunning and resilience. General Ziller continued, explaining how Earth's wars were won not through brute force, but through strategy and intelligence. The humans had mastered the art of deception, creating traps, ambushing enemies, and using the environment to their advantage. The instructor shifted the discussion toward a more modern age. With another press of a button, the holographic display showed futuristic images. It was clear that humanity had learned from their past. They had harnessed advanced technology to enhance their military capabilities. There were images of cloaking devices, sleek drones flying silently through the air, and advanced AI systems capable of coordinating battles with unmatched precision. While humanity's early tactics were rooted in simple cunning, General Ziller explained, they eventually embraced technology. They built cloaking devices, personal and large-scale ones, that could hide entire battalions from enemy detection. They created drones that could swarm like locusts, overwhelming their enemies before they even knew what hit them. And their AIs are sophisticated enough to anticipate enemy movements, predict strategies, and adjust the battlefield in real time. And as the lesson continued, it became clear that this was just the beginning. There was more to learn, more to uncover about humanity's tactics and strategies, and the galaxy would have to adjust its perception of Earth if it hoped to stand a chance in the future. The tension in the room was palpable as the students anxiously awaited the next segment of their lesson. General Zeller had shown them the strategic brilliance of humanity, but now he was about to reveal something far deeper, the emotional core of human warfare. As he activated the next video, the classroom was suddenly filled with the sound of distant explosions and the screech of enemy weapons. The holographic display shifted to a chaotic battle on Earth. This was no ordinary battle. The footage showed human soldiers, armed with little more than basic tools, fighting desperately against an overwhelming alien force. The alien invaders were massive and technologically advanced, their weapons capable of obliterating entire battalions with a single strike. Yet the humans fought on, refusing to back down. They moved with surprising coordination, their faces set in grim determination as they pushed forward against impossible odds. The students watched in stunned silence as the humans engaged in brutal, close-quarters combat. They used whatever they could find, rocks, makeshift clubs, and even bare hands, to defend themselves and their loved ones. The aliens, with their superior technology, seemed confused by the ferocity of the humans. Every time they thought they had defeated one group of soldiers, another would spring up from behind cover, fighting with the same relentless intensity. There was no fear, no hesitation, just the will to fight, to survive, and to protect. As the footage continued, the students were struck by the sight of humans working together, strategizing in real time with nothing but their instincts and a fierce determination. Despite being outgunned and outmatched, they fought as though the very survival of their species depended on it, because, in a way, it did. There was no time for hesitation, no room for weakness. In the face of overwhelming odds, humanity's greatest strength was their unwavering resolve. This, General Zeller said quietly, is the human spirit. It is not their technology that makes them dangerous. It is their will to fight. Even in the face of certain death, they will fight for each other. They fight not just for victory, but for what they love. The students were silent, processing the raw emotion of what they had just witnessed. Bonner, in particular, couldn't tear his eyes away from the screen. He saw human soldiers, ordinary people, sacrificing themselves for the greater good. The image of a young soldier, his uniform torn and bloodied, throwing himself into the line of fire to protect a group of civilians, struck him to his core. The soldier's face was filled with a mixture of fear and determination, and when the explosion came, it was clear he had given everything for the people he cared about. As the footage ended, Bonner felt a lump form in his throat. The instructor's words echoed in his mind. Humans fight not just for victory, but for what they love. Bonner had never seen anything like this. He had read about warfare, about tactics and strategy, but this was something different. It wasn't about victory for the sake of conquest. It was about protecting the ones they cared for, about fighting for something bigger than themselves. The other students were equally affected. They had seen battles, sure, seen whole fleets clashing in the cold void of space, seen armies of robots and drones tearing through enemies with surgical precision. But this was something raw, something deeply human. The students, many of them hardened by years of training, now found themselves questioning their own understanding of warfare. Could they fight like this? Could they sacrifice everything for the people they loved? General Zeller, who had seen countless wars and battles, stood in front of the class, his expression unreadable. He knew this moment was crucial. The human soldiers in the footage had displayed something the galaxy's most advanced civilizations often lacked, a deep emotional connection to their cause, to their people. This was the key to understanding humanity's strength. It wasn't just their technology or their tactics. It was the power of their emotions, their desire to protect, to fight for the ones they loved, to survive against all odds. "This is the greatest weapon humans have," General Xalier said, his voice carrying an air of finality. "Their determination. Their ability to fight when there is no hope, when everything is lost. They will sacrifice themselves without hesitation for a cause they believe in. And that is why they are a force to be reckoned with." The students exchanged uneasy glances. It was one thing to hear about Earth's early survival tactics, but this new information was on a whole different level. The idea that humanity had integrated such high-tech warfare into their arsenal made them realize just how much Earth had evolved since its humble beginnings. They had not only survived, but they had become a formidable force. As if to drive the point home, General Xalier called up another piece of footage. This time, it showed an alien fleet, massive, powerful, and imposing, on the brink of invading Earth. The fleet's advanced technology should have guaranteed victory, but what happened next stunned the students. The footage revealed Earth's response to the invasion: weather manipulation. Using technology that could control the weather, Earth's military created violent storms, powerful winds, and thick, disorienting fog, confusing the alien fleet. As the aliens struggled to navigate through the chaos, Earth's military unleashed an unexpected offensive. In the end, nearly 70% of the invading forces were wiped out without a single human soldier engaging in direct combat. The room fell into stunned silence as the footage ended. The students were shaken. They had never seen anything like it. An entire fleet had been neutralized, not by superior weaponry or firepower, but by human ingenuity and an ability to manipulate their environment to gain the upper hand. It was a strategy that relied on deception, unpredictability, and a deep understanding of how to use technology in ways their enemies never expected. "Do you see now?" General Xalier asked, his voice low and serious. "This is what makes humans dangerous. They will not meet you head-on. They will find a way to make you doubt your own strength, to turn your advantages against you." The students were no longer laughing or mocking. The gravity of the situation was starting to sink in. Earth had evolved from a planet filled with primitive beings to a world capable of outsmarting some of the galaxy's most powerful species. The lesson was clear: never underestimate the resourcefulness of a species that has fought to survive for so long. One of the students, Bonner, a young and idealistic alien with large, expressive eyes, was particularly affected by the lesson. As he watched the footage, he found himself questioning everything he had been taught about Earth. Bonner had always believed that the galaxy's more advanced civilizations were the true powerhouses. He had thought of Earth as a backwater planet, a place where survival was a constant struggle due to its lack of advanced technology. But what he was seeing now made him rethink that belief. Bonner raised his hand, his voice hesitant but filled with genuine curiosity. "General Xalier, if humans are capable of such tactics, then could we be underestimating them? Are we so sure that we could defeat them if we were to invade?" The question hung in the air, and for a moment, no one spoke. The other students exchanged uneasy glances, and even General Xalier's expression seemed to soften. Bonner's question was not just about Earth. It was about the galaxy's entire perception of humanity. General Xalier finally spoke, his tone quieter, but no less intense. "Bonner, what you're asking is the very reason why Earth has survived. It's why they've defeated species far more advanced than they are. They fight with a desperation and a determination that most of us can't comprehend. Their ability to adapt and fight using whatever they have at their disposal is what makes them so dangerous. If we underestimate them, we could be making the grave mistake." Bonner sat back in his chair, the weight of the realization settling in. The lesson had not just been about tactics or technology. It had been about understanding the true nature of humanity, a species that would never give up, no matter the odds. As General Xalier's words echoed in the classroom, the students could no longer view Earth as just a primitive planet. They now saw it as something much more, an unpredictable, resilient force that had fought and clawed its way to the top, and now stood as one of the galaxy's most dangerous adversaries. As she sat up, stretching her sore muscles, she noticed Ethan already awake, preparing something over the campfire. The smell of cooking food drifted through the air, and Keleth's stomach growled loudly in protest. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until that moment. "Good morning," Ethan greeted her, turning to give her a warm smile. "I hope you slept well." Keleth hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yes, I did. Thank you for everything." Ethan simply nodded, not pressing her for more. He had been patient with her ever since they met, and Keleth was starting to appreciate that. He didn't ask too many questions or push her to open up, but she knew that, eventually, she would have to trust him. If she was going to survive in this unknown world, she needed allies. And Ethan, for all his human simplicity, had proven himself to be someone she could rely on. At least for now. "Would you like some food?" Ethan asked, holding out a bowl filled with a strange, porridge-like substance. It didn't look like anything Keleth had ever seen, but she didn't care. Her hunger overpowered her reluctance, and she nodded. "Yes, thank you," she said, taking the bowl from him. She sat down on a log near the fire, savoring the warmth of the meal. It didn't taste like much, but it was filling, and that was all that mattered. Ethan sat across from her, watching her quietly as she ate. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The forest around them seemed alive, but in a peaceful way. Keleth felt a sense of calm that she hadn't felt in a long time. Her world had always been filled with tension, fights, survival, distrust. But here, in Ethan's quiet camp, it felt different. There was no pressure, no immediate danger, no expectations. It was a strange feeling. She had never had the luxury of resting without fear. After a few moments, Ethan spoke again. "I know this might seem sudden, but do you want to talk about what happened? About your tribe?" Keleth froze for a moment, her spoon halfway to her mouth. She hadn't expected him to bring it up so soon. Her exile was a painful subject, one that she didn't like to think about, let alone talk about. She had been cast out, betrayed, and left to survive alone. The pain of it still lingered deep inside her, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to share that part of her life with anyone, especially not with a human. But something about Ethan made her want to open up. His eyes weren't filled with judgment or pity. There was just quiet understanding in them, as if he knew what it was like to suffer. Perhaps it was because of that she felt a small flicker of hope, a tiny voice inside her urging her to trust him. I was exiled," Keleth began slowly, her voice soft. "I was cast out by my own people, my tribe. They didn't want me anymore." She paused, her eyes focused on the ground as the words escaped her lips. It was the first time she had said it out loud, and it stung. "My powers, they're too dangerous for them. So they decided it was better for me to leave." Ethan didn't interrupt. He simply listened, his gaze steady and compassionate. Keleth took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. This was harder than she thought it would be. "They thought I was a threat. They feared what I could do." "I see," Ethan said quietly, his voice filled with understanding. "That must have been really tough." Keleth nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "It was. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that I had to leave everything behind, my home, my family, my entire life. And I'm still not sure what I'm supposed to do now." Ethan seemed to think for a moment, his eyes thoughtful. "You've had to carry all that alone for so long, haven't you?" Keleth didn't answer at first. She wasn't sure how to respond. She had always kept her emotions bottled up, afraid that showing weakness would only get her hurt again. But in that moment, in the quiet of the forest, she felt something shift inside her. Maybe, just maybe, it was okay to not have all the answers. Maybe it was okay to let herself be vulnerable, just for a moment. "Yes," Keleth said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "I've been alone for so long. I don't know how to trust anyone anymore." Ethan nodded slowly, as if he understood exactly what she was going through. "I can't pretend to know what it's like for you. But I do know that you don't have to carry this alone. You don't have to do this by yourself." Caliph looked up at him, meeting his gaze. There was sincerity in his eyes, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a small spark of hope. Maybe he was right. Maybe she didn't have to keep running from her past. Maybe it was okay to trust someone again. "I don't know if I can trust anyone," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But I'll try. For now." Ethan smiled, a reassuring, kind smile that made her feel a little less alone. "That's all anyone can ask for. Trust takes time. You don't have to rush it. Just take things one step at a time." Caliph took a deep breath, feeling the weight on her chest ease just a little. Trusting Ethan was still a big step, but maybe, just maybe, she was ready to take that first step. The rest of the morning passed in quiet conversation. Caliph told Ethan a little more about her tribe, about her powers, and what had happened that led to her exile. Ethan listened carefully, never judging, never pushing her to reveal more than she was ready to share. For the first time, she felt like someone was actually hearing her, not just listening to her words but understanding them. When they were done eating, Ethan stood up and began packing up his camp. "We'll need to keep moving soon," he said. "It's not safe to stay in one place for too long." Caliph nodded, rising to her feet as well. She wasn't sure where they were going next, but she knew that with Ethan by her side, she didn't feel as lost as she had before. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone in this world as she had thought. As they packed up the last of the supplies, Caliph found herself looking at Ethan with a new sense of respect. He was different from anyone she had met before. He didn't judge her for her powers. He didn't fear her. And for some reason, that made her feel like she could trust him. Even though everything about this situation was unknown, there was one thing that felt certain. Ethan was someone she could rely on. "Where are we heading?" Caliph asked, as they both began walking away from the camp. Ethan looked at her, his eyes focused ahead. "I don't know yet, but wherever we go, I'll make sure you're safe. We'll figure it out together." Caliph felt a small smile tug at her lips. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she might be able to face it. Not alone, but with someone who cared. Caliph had hoped that, after a few days of peace, the worst of her troubles were behind her. She had come to believe that with Ethan by her side, she might find some stability, a chance to heal from the scars of her past. But as the days passed and they ventured deeper into the dense forest, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The tension in the air was palpable, as if the forest itself knew that danger was closing in. Ethan noticed it too. His keen instincts had already sensed that they were being watched, even though they had taken great care to keep their movements quiet and inconspicuous. Every night, he set up extra traps around their camp, but every morning, they found them triggered or disturbed, as if someone, or something, was deliberately tracking their movements. Caliph's pulse quickened each time they found a new sign of the pursuit. She had learned to trust her instincts, and they were screaming at her that trouble was not far behind. "What do you think it is?" Caliph asked one evening as they set up camp again. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her, but she didn't turn to meet it. She didn't want him to see the worry in her eyes. Ethan squinted into the distance, his eyes scanning the surroundings as he worked. "Someone's been following us for days," he said quietly. "I don't think it's a wild animal. This feels like something more deliberate." Caliph's heart skipped a beat. "My tribe," she muttered under her breath. She hadn't wanted to admit it, but it was the only explanation that made sense. Her people were relentless when it came to tracking down those who had been cast out. They would never leave her alone, not until they had finished what they started. "They must be getting closer," she added, her voice tight with anxiety. "I've known them my whole life. They won't stop until they find me." Ethan turned to face her fully, his expression softening. "We'll deal with them. You don't have to face this alone." There was a firmness in his voice, a promise she hadn't realized she needed to hear. For a moment, Calith allowed herself to believe that maybe Ethan could protect her. Maybe she didn't have to fight this battle alone. But deep down, she knew that no one could outrun her past forever. Her tribe was relentless. They wouldn't just let her go, not when they believed she was a threat to everything they stood for. She had been exiled for a reason. Her powers were too dangerous, and they wouldn't hesitate to eliminate her if they thought it was the only way to protect their people. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest. The fire flickered, casting a soft glow on their faces as they ate their meal in silence. Calith's mind was racing, running through the possibilities of what might happen next. Could they outrun her tribe? Could they hide well enough to escape the pursuit? Or would it all end in a confrontation she wasn't ready for? As the night grew darker, she heard it, the faintest rustling sound coming from the trees. She froze, holding her breath, her senses sharpening. Ethan heard it too, his hand instinctively going to the weapon at his side. The sound grew louder, closer. It wasn't an animal this time. It was footsteps, deliberate and controlled, as if whoever was coming knew exactly where they were. "Get ready," Ethan whispered, his voice low but urgent. Calith's heart pounded in her chest as she quickly gathered her things, preparing for the worst. She knew this moment had been coming for days, but now that it was here, she felt the weight of her fear pressing down on her. What would happen if they were caught? Would they be able to escape? Or would this be the end of their journey together? The footsteps stopped just beyond the clearing. Calith's breath caught in her throat as she caught sight of movement between the trees. Shadows shifted, and then, from the darkness, figures began to emerge. Her heart sank when she saw them. Members of her tribe, their dark figures barely visible in the shadows. They moved with the precision of trained hunters, their eyes scanning the area as they searched for any sign of their quarry. Ethan gripped his weapon tighter, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. "We need to move now," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Calith didn't hesitate. She knew that if they stayed here, they would be surrounded in minutes. But there was something else, something she hadn't told Ethan yet. Her powers, the very thing that had led to her exile. She had the ability to manipulate energy, to control it with her mind. It was a gift, but it was also a curse. She had been taught to hide it, to control it, but when she was threatened, it could explode in uncontrollable ways. Her tribe knew this, and they feared it. As they moved quickly through the forest, Calith's mind raced. Could she use her powers to escape? Could she make it so her tribe couldn't track them? She didn't know if she was ready to reveal the full extent of her abilities to Ethan, but in this moment, it seemed like the only choice. "I'm going to try something," she said quietly, her voice shaky with uncertainty. "It might help us escape." Ethan glanced at her, his expression hardening. "What are you going to do?" "I can manipulate energy," she explained, her voice low but urgent. "I can cloak us, but I need to concentrate, and it might only last for a short time." Ethan nodded, his jaw clenched. "Do it." Calith closed her eyes, focusing on the energy within her. She could feel the power pulsing through her veins, like a current running through the very air around her. It was a strange, almost intoxicating feeling, but it was also dangerous. She had never used this much of her power before, but the situation left her with no choice. She had to protect them. With a deep breath, Calith reached out with her mind, pulling the energy around them, cloaking them from sight. She could feel the air around them shift, the world seeming to blur and fade. The energy she controlled hummed in the air, creating an invisible shield around them. Ethan's eyes widened as the world around them seemed to grow still, as if they had become a part of the shadows themselves. He couldn't see it, but he could feel it. A subtle shift in the atmosphere, a strange sense of calm that settled over them. The figures from her tribe walked past, so close that Calith could hear their footsteps. But they didn't stop. They didn't seem to sense that anyone was nearby. The cloak was working. Ethan breathed a sigh of relief, but Calith couldn't relax. She knew this wouldn't last long. Her powers were not infinite, and using them to cloak them would take its toll. "They've passed," Ethan whispered after a few moments. "We need to move quickly." Kelith nodded, but she could feel the drain on her energy already. Cloaking them had taken more out of her than she had expected. She needed to rest, but there was no time. Her tribe would regroup, and they would keep coming. "We need to find somewhere to hide," she said, her voice tight with exhaustion. "Somewhere they won't find us." Ethan led the way, moving through the forest with the precision of a soldier. Kelith followed closely behind, doing her best to keep up despite the weariness settling in her limbs. They couldn't stop now, not until they were safe. As they pushed forward, Kelith couldn't help but wonder how much longer they could keep running. How long could they evade her tribe before they were caught? And what would happen if they were finally cornered? The answers to those questions were unknown. But one thing was certain: Kelith couldn't escape her past forever. And one day, her tribe would catch up to her. The forest around them felt eerily quiet as Kelith and Ethan moved deeper into the thick trees. The evening sun had begun to set, casting long shadows over the ground. The air was heavy, as if it could sense the inevitable confrontation that was coming. Kelith could feel her pulse racing in her veins, her anxiety growing with every step. She had hoped for peace. She had hoped that maybe, just maybe, she could escape her past. But now, there was no denying it. The time had come to face her tribe. Ethan walked beside her, his eyes scanning the surroundings. He had been calm throughout their journey, never showing fear or hesitation, but Kelith could see the tension in his jaw. He was trying to stay strong for her, but she could tell that even he knew this was not going to be easy. "They'll be here soon," Kelith whispered, her voice tight with fear. "They never stop. They won't stop until they have me back, or until they've finished what they started." Ethan didn't reply right away. Instead, he continued walking, his hand resting lightly on the weapon strapped to his side. He was preparing for the worst, just as Kelith was. But this wasn't just about weapons. This was about survival. Her people were not only skilled in combat, but also in strategy and manipulation. They would use everything at their disposal to bring her back, and they would stop at nothing to ensure that no one helped her. "They won't stop until they've caught me," Kelith continued, more to herself than to Ethan. Her thoughts raced. Her mind kept going back to the day she had been exiled. She remembered the harsh words of her elders, the cold faces of her tribe. They had told her that her powers were too dangerous, that she posed a threat to their way of life. But they didn't understand. They didn't understand that she never wanted to hurt anyone. She had only wanted to survive, to be free. But to them, her very existence was a threat. Ethan finally broke the silence. "We'll make it through this. You're not alone anymore, Kelith." She glanced at him, grateful for his support, but the fear still clung to her chest, like a heavy weight. "I don't know if I can fight them, Ethan. They're part of me. I know their ways. I know how they think. And I fear that what they want is more than just my capture. They'll do anything to make sure I never return." The truth of her words hung heavily in the air, but before Ethan could respond, the sound of footsteps reached their ears, footsteps that were unmistakably close. Kelith's heart skipped a beat. They were here. Her tribe had arrived. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He gestured for Kelith to stay low, and together they ducked behind the thick underbrush, their breathing shallow. Kelith's heart pounded in her chest as she peered through the leaves, her eyes locking onto the figures moving into the clearing ahead. The silhouettes of her people appeared like shadows in the fading light, their tall, imposing figures unmistakable. There were 5 of them, elite members of her tribe, the warriors who had been sent to bring her back. The air around them felt charged with energy. Kelith could feel the power of their presence, the unrelenting force of their will. These were the people who had cast her out, and now they were coming for her. She gripped her chest, trying to steady her breath. The fear in her body was overwhelming, but she couldn't let it control her. She couldn't let them see her weakness. "Stay here," Ethan whispered, his voice low and firm. "I'll distract them."